My name is Frances M Copp. Actually, I was Frances Miller Whitcomb Copp.
Okay.
And I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the Blodgett Hospital. And that was kind of unique because many children during that era were born at home with the help of a midwife. And my husband and all his brothers were born at home. So being in the hospital was kind of a unique thing.
What, if you don't mind telling us, what year were you born?
Pardon?
What year were you born?
In 1927.
Okay.
So I'm 96 years old, and April I'll be 97.
Nice.
And we lived in Lansing, or Grand Rapids, for the first 6 years of my life. And then, of course, the Depression.
Who is we? How big is your family?
My father, Carl Whitcomb Sr., and my brother, Carl Whitcomb Jr., and my mother, Frances Miller Whitcomb, and my sister, Margaret.
Okay. Were you the middle child?
I was the youngest.
You were the youngest.
That's
okay.
the one, and my sister and brother always called me the spoiled brat. And I guess I still
They were
am.
just jealous, right?
And, well, I think my son could still say I was a spoiled brat. But anyway, my father had been employed by the American Vitrified Company in Grand Ledge, and they made sewer tubes and everything for cities to lay sewers.
Okay.
And he would have been in great shape during the Depression if it hadn't been for the company in Grand Ledge burned down.
Oh, okay.
Of course, there was no money in the insurance companies. They were broke, so there was no way to rebuild the company. So he was out of a job. And he worked and tried to find a job where none in Grand Rapids he could find. And he finally decided he'd have to call his friend Oscar Olander.
Okay.
Oscar Olander was the head of the Michigan State Police. He was the, whatever they call the head of all the, can't remember now, but anyway, he was the director on the Michigan State Police. My dad and Oscar Olander had gone to high school together in Cadillac, and he felt like he could call Oscar and say, do you have any ideas of a job in Lansing? Could you find anything for me? A few days later, Oscar called back and said, I have a job for you in Oldsmobile.
Okay.
So we immediately moved to Lansing, and there was a subdivision that the Oldsmobile company built called Sagamore Hill, and it had about 4 streets in it. And they built the houses there about 100 years ago, and they were to be for their white-collared workers. Well, with the Depression coming, the white-collar workers weren't interested in buying new houses or anything. So they opened it up to anybody could buy it. And we did have many Oldsmobile workers in that subdivision. And the house we bought still looks charming today. We went by it just a year ago. My son took me on a trip through there, and the houses are still, it's a beautiful subject.
Still looks similar?
Very, I'd buy it in a minute, and our house looked charming. All the houses were 2 stories. They were wood siding, and they had a spacious living room. We had a spacious dining room, and off the living room was a side porch, screen porch, that we loved in the summer. What was very small was the kitchen, and upstairs we had 3 bedrooms. Not spacious, but they weren't skimpy either. They were very adequate. What was not adequate were the closets. They were tiny closets, but people didn't have a lot of clothes in those days either. And then we had a I had called it a half room. It was just a small, very tiny, small room over one of the dormers. And we used that as a playroom for my sister and I, our toys. We had one bathroom, no shower, just a tub bath. And we had to take turns in the tub bath.
How old were you at this point?
And my father, who worked at Olds, came home. He worked different shifts. About every 6 weeks he had to change shifts from afternoon to night and to day. And he always took a bath when he got home. My brother always had to use the bathtub in the morning. He was 7 years older than my sister and I.
How old were you then?
I was 6 years old.
Okay.
And when we moved there, I was going into first grade. Carl was at Boulder French Junior High, the Hartwell U, and my sister was in elementary school also. And we went to the Barnes Avenue School. We walked there to and from school. We didn't have a car then. And what was interesting in our houses, most people heated their homes with coal. We had a coal furnace.
Okay.
And so we needed approximately, I think it was about a ton of coal, I'm not sure, each month. My dad would call. And in our basement, the coal furnace sat right in the center of the house, so that the heating ducts would go up to all the rooms. But in the basement was one room that was sealed off with concrete off and an open top. That was called the coal bin. And when they made the delivery of coal, the coal truck would drive up on our driveway to the window, basement window, opposite the coal bin. They would put a chute from the truck down into the coal bin, and then they would let it go, and all the load of coal would slide down the chute inside the coal bin. We had to tend the furnace at least 3 times a day. Someone had to go down and shovel the coal into the furnace to keep it going. If we went away for 4 or 5 hours, the furnace would go out. Then when we come home, they would have to start the furnace all over again and get the house warmed up again. So that was unique.
Was that one of your chores to get coal?
Pardon?
Was that one of your chores to get coal?
My chores were, yes, every now and then, when everybody was busy, they said, Fred, go down and open the door to the furnace and throw some coal in there. And I'd have to make 2 or 3 trips. I was trying to think, there was another, another thing that was unique to these houses. Most of us could not afford an electric refrigerator. My friends who lived up on Moores River Drive were all very wealthy children, and their families all had electric refrigerators. But there was a problem with people buying a refrigerator in our house, in our houses, in our subdivision, because our kitchens were so small, there was no place to put them.
Oh, okay.
So what we had was kind of a lean-to porch that was attached to the kitchen door. And out on the porch was just a small little porch, was a ice box. We called them an ice box in those days. And the ice box looked just like a chest. They were wooden, and they looked just like a wooden chest you'd see in your bedroom. The ice container was in the upper left-hand corner of the refrigerator, or ice box as we called them. And then the rest of it was just an open door that you open just like a big refrigerator. We had to have ice delivered to us 2 or 3 times a week because, of course, the ice would melt very rapidly. We had a little sign that we put in our window to tell the iceman when they came whether we wanted 25 pounds of ice that day or whether we wanted the maximum, the 50-pound chunk of ice. The iceman, that was unique. The ice, I guess the delivery was a cart, it was an ice cart, and the ice was all packed in this cart. It was pulled by 2 horses, and they would come by the house several times a week, 2 or 3 times a week to deliver ice. They'd look in the window to see whether you wanted 25 or whether you wanted 50 pounds. Then the iceman would take his ice picks or tongs, and it was like a big scissors, the tongs and sharp points on each end. And he'd smash that into his 25 or 50 pounds of ice, clamp them down, then he'd pick it up and have to carry it all the way from the street, all the way back to our back porch and up and put it in the ice box, close the door. Now the ice is going to melt, right? Where's that water going? It went down a little chute that was inside the ice box. It went down to the floor, and right over the chute, my father had a hole that in the floor of the porch that the water drained down into that screen open chute and down into the ground. When the iceman came, all the children on the street got really excited because as he chipped the ice away to get 25 pounds or to get 50 pounds loosened up, chips of ice would fall off. And sometimes he purposely would chip some ice off and give it to the kids that were standing there waiting for him to come. It was like getting an ice cream cone. Everybody was so thrilled to get those chips of ice to suck on. You'd think we had, as I say, an ice cream man by. And that was our big daily treat. We'd follow the ice truck right up to the end of the street so that maybe we could get 2 chips of ice. And that was thrilling. When my brother started college at Michigan State, he lived at home, and being a land-grant college, I think it was a land-grant college that was responsible for this, but they made all incoming men take ROTC. Carl was no exception. And so he took ROTC for 4 years, and I think it was required of all the land-grant colleges to implement that program. I'm not exactly sure of that fact, but I think so. When he graduated, well, I should back up. The war was on, and the Michigan State troops, Michigan State troopers, were called up to inaction, which left Michigan with no National Guard. Their National Guard was all in service. So Dwight Rich, who was superintendent of schools then in Lansing, got together with a bunch of his friends, which was Carl was one of Dwight's friends. And Carl said, Dwight said, I want to form a group of men capable of going in and helping. We have no Michigan State troops anymore. They're in service. But we've got to have something to protect the people of Michigan.
Right.
So Carl volunteered to go in as a lieutenant in the Michigan State Troops. Everything would have been fine, and he would have graduated in that June, except that was the year that riots broke out in Detroit. And Carl was pulled out of college right away to go and help with the riots in Detroit. And it lasted quite a long while. When Carl got back to school, the term was almost over. He was due to graduate. He made up all his classes that he had missed, but he could not make up the lab hours. There just wasn't enough time in the day or the facilities of the lab for him to make up the lab hours. So they withheld his diploma and said that he couldn't graduate. And that was very crushing. So in June, he got out of college, and 2 weeks later, he was called into service. And they needed a second lieutenant. He graduated as a second lieutenant. They needed a second lieutenant in the Louisiana State Guard.
What year is this?
1942.
Okay, so World War II.
Yes. So Carl was immediately sent to Louisiana State Guard, and here he was second Louis, which they don't like. And they didn't like it that he was from Michigan and the wrong side on the Civil War. And Carl said they were still fighting the Civil War when he got down there. And he had a very difficult time trying to win over the men in that group, but eventually he did. But Carl was sent from our house to Louisiana, and just in a matter of days, he was on the ship for England. And he went so fast that his trunk, what do they call those? Put their clothes and everything in their trunks. Didn't even catch up with them. The trunk was several days behind them, and they were already overseas, and they didn't know what to do with his trunk. So they sent the trunk back to us at his house. Well, here we are with getting the trunk back, and all his clothes and everything, and all we could think of, he'd been killed.
Right.
And it was very, very hard to take. But when he got to England, he was able to make contact with us. And he told my dad how to get the trunk shipped to him. So my dad arranged for that, and he finally got his clothes, but it was months before he got any clothes over there. Carl was unbelievably, he made the invasion of Africa. He made 4 invasions. He made the invasion of Africa, the invasion of Sicily, the invasion of Anzio and Salerno. 4 invasions. He never got a trip home. He never got a furlough home. He didn't get home until he left when I was in junior high and came home when I was in college. So he came home in 45. He was one of the first ones that got shipped home because they shipped him home according to how many points they had. And points were how many battles you'd been in, and he just had so many points because he never had a furlough and nothing. So he was one of the first ones home, thank goodness. But he earned the Silver Star while he was over there. And I'd like to tell you how he earned it, but I don't think our family is really clear on that. Are they all on?
I don't know.
I think Mark knows. My other son Mark has a better idea of how he earned it, but he never talked about it.
Yeah. Something heroic.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to point out is what a nice thing that our government did for the GIs. the economists were very, very concerned when all these hundreds of GIs reached home that they wouldn't have jobs for them, housing for them. They just didn't have facilities for them. And so what can we do? What should we do? And the smart ones got together and they said, let's send them to college. We'll get the GI Bill passed, we'll send them to college, and they can get a degree. They'll be white-collar labor, and they will be earning much more money than they would had they not gone to college. And they will more than make up the deficit that we're spending now to educate them. And we will get that money back over the years of the 40, 50 years that they will be earning money and paying income tax. So that would offset the cost. That was a wonderful thing. I was in college at that time, and I would say that about 75% of my other students in college classes were all GIs. They were just loaded. The campus was just loaded.
Did you go to Michigan State as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And it was nice because Michigan State said the GIs are going to get the best housing, the best counselors, and the best chance for a good schedule. And there are no 8 o'clock classes in the morning, no more night classes for them. They got the daytime classes. So it was people like me who were coming from the city got the 8 o'clock classes and the night classes. I was living at home and I had to take the 2 buses each day to get out to college and to make an 8 o'clock class. I was up at the crack of dawn trying to get out there in time and then walk to campus to where my classes were.
Was Michigan State mostly a farm back then? Was East Lansing a pretty big city at that time?
I didn't understand.
Is East Lansing, was it a big city at that time?
Pretty
established.
I don't think East Lansing has changed proportionately at all since
Okay.
1945.
Gotcha.
And they didn't have a lot of free land for development. But then I'd also have to stay and have night classes. Those were the bad ones because they'd start at 8 o'clock and sometimes they're supposed to be out at 10, but we weren't always out at 10. And I had a bus to catch. I had to catch a 10 o'clock bus going back into Lansing because the last bus that I could take that went up around where my house was left at 11 o'clock. So if I didn't get there and get that transfer made, I couldn't get home.
Tell a little bit more about your high school and college. What did you go to college for? To be a teacher, right?
I did, and
How did you decide that?
Well, when I went to college, let me just back up about the war.
Okay.
One thing that happened when we were in high school, which I don't approve of today, and I'm sure they wouldn't make the same call today, but when we were in high school, if any of our family or brothers or husbands, nobody had a husband, but any of our brothers were injured or killed, they would call that person out of class, and then they would call their best friend out of class, and the best friend, and they would go to the office. And I can remember Mary Van Belzer, and our families were very close families. And Bill Van Belzer and my brother were close friends, high school buddies. And my mother was a good friend of Mrs. Van Belzer and took care of her when she was dying of cancer. And Mary Van Belzer and I were called out of class. And we cried all the way to the office. is it your brother or my brother?
Right.
We didn't know which one, and we didn't know whether they were killed or hurt or what.
It's terrible.
But they would tell us then what happened. And Mary's brother was injured and had a leg blown off, and it was her younger brother. It wasn't Bill, Jim, and I thought that was just a horrible policy. I thought that they got word that somebody was hurt or killed, they should have called our parents and
Right.
let us go home and hear it from them.
Yeah.
Not there, not
Yeah.
at school. That was wrong. And I still think that was something that, in retrospect, that they realized was not a good policy.
Yeah. It obviously had a big effect on you.
Yeah.
You know.
Terrible. And, but I guess I hit the main things.
Were you real good in school? You did well in school, and
Pardon?
did you do well in school?
Pretty
A
well.
good student?
I wasn't a full A student by any chance, but I wasn't an all D or C student either.
Did you do any sports or any kind of things like that, or?
We didn't have those
No,
things
yeah, I guess
during
not,
the war.
right.
And we were going to the old Central High School for 1 year, and then they finished Sexton High. They were in the process of building it when the war broke out. They got that finished, and they sent us all then to Sexton. So I spent part of my 10th and then all my 11th and 12th grade at Sexton. And we didn't have, the gym wasn't finished, the pool wasn't done, the classrooms were done, but that's about it. The rest of the school was not completed. But we had a good time there.
Did you graduate in 1945?
Yes, and we were the state basketball champions 1 year when I was going there, I think 11th grade. And we were state champs in basketball, I think it was 1944 or so. And so the gym was finished for them to use for, the basketball, and we did go to all the basketball games. I don't remember much of the football, but I guess we didn't have the football field. But
Did you have any kind of boyfriends or anything like that in high school?
I did, but I went with a boy that was a year younger than I was, because it seemed like everybody in my grade, when they got to be like seniors, they'd stay like for half a year till the senior prom or so, and then they would go off and join the branch of service that they wanted to be in, because they didn't want to wait and be drafted.
Okay.
So when we graduated, a lot of our boys were already in service. So when I went to senior prom with Wayne Kreitz was his name, named after Kreitz Road out there, and he joined right up after the prom, and that's what a lot of the boys did. So there wasn't a lot of. I went with Bobby Drew, who was a nice boy, but it was just fun to be with, and that was. But I would say I didn't have a lot of girlfriends. We had a group of girls, about 5, 6 girls, that started first grade together. We went all the way through junior high, high school, and college. And unfortunately, there's only 2 of us left. The rest of all passed away. But anyway, they were happy times. And another thing, my folks had gotten a car, an old Grand Page. It was a brand new car when they got it. But it was, the Grand Pages were bought out by Nash Cars, and the little green car was, Grand Page was fun to drive, and it could hold a lot of my girlfriends, and it was supposed to be saved for my brother for after the war. But that we had gas rationing in those days, and that was another thing. That I worked for the mileage administration. Our neighborhood, our next door neighbor, she was director of the state mileage department, and they were the ones that gave out gas stickers and a lot of gas allotted.
They had a limit on how much gas you could use? Is that what it was?
Allotted for all the state employees, which included the state police and.
Oh, okay.
And, they'd all have to come to the state mileage administration to get their gas and.
Gotcha.
Plead their needs.
Gotcha.
And I going to high school for half a day, and then worked at the mileage administration. And this is right up for the other half of the day. And she let me have the state police, which I loved because they were all handsome, I thought. And they all were begging me to give them gas. And oh gosh, I would give them.
Now, how old were you at this point?
I was in senior high.
Senior high?
Yeah. And so, but I remember high school as being pretty much a happy day, a happy time, with the exception of worried about
your brother. Yeah. So then, what, you decided to go to Michigan State? Was that just something that was out?
I went to Michigan State, and my mother was a social worker for the state of Michigan. My sister was a social worker, and she too worked for the state of Michigan. I didn't know what else to do, so I said, well, I guess I better be a social worker. So I enrolled in the sociology department. When I got in there, I hated it. I hated sociology. And I didn't like going up to Lapeer and seeing all those poor kids up there and everything, and state hospitals. And I didn't want any part of it. In fact, it bothered me so much. My sister and I looked a lot alike. So I would send my sister on the field trips instead of me, and they never caught us. And I kept telling I had John Cobbs, the best, he was the baseball coach at the state, and I had John Cobbs as my advisor. And as I say, all the good advisors were busy with vets. And John was a very nice man, but he didn't know a lot about sociology or anything like that. And I said to him when I was in my sophomore year, Mr. Cobbs, I don't want to stay in this. I want to go into teaching. Well, you can't do that now. You've got too many credits in sociology. You can't change now. I said, I don't want to be in your sociology. I want to be in education. I want to go back into education. You wouldn't let me transfer. And it kept getting nearer and nearer graduation. And I got to be we were on a 3-term, I think, at base then. So each year was 3 terms, and I had 1 term done in my senior year. And I said to Mr. Combs, I don't want this degree, what am I gonna do with it? He said, you're gonna have a divisional degree. And he said, I said, what's that? And he said, well, it's gonna be a divisional degree in sociology, economics, and history. And I said, what in the world would I do with that? There aren't any jobs. I said, I don't see any ads in the paper looking for a divisional degree in sociology, history, and economics. I don't have a teaching degree. There's not a job in the world I could get. He said, you'll find a job. So I wasn't anxious to spend any more money. You know, it was a degree I couldn't use. And I kept telling my mother and dad that I won't be able to find a job when I get out. Well, then I had to, being a social major, I had to take this course called Marriage and the Family. And at that time, Michigan State made a rule that all graduates of state had to take Marriage and the Family. My husband didn't know that. And he thought he graduated in June, and then they wouldn't give him his degree. And he said, you have to come back and take Marriage and the Family, or you're not going to get your degree. So he came back, thank goodness, and took Marriage and the Family, and sat next to the back row. I sat in the back row right behind him. He kept trying to date my girlfriend, Madge Walters, who was a beautiful...
This is your future husband.
Yeah.
I thought I skipped a part there and you already were married. I missed... So, okay.
And so he kept trying to date Madge, and as I say, she was a beautiful ballet dancer and still dancer and everything. And just a lovely person, and he kept trying to date her, and she wanted no part of him. And I kept kicking him in the rear end because he sat right in front of me and said, I'm available. And he didn't ask me out until the very last day of summer school. He was going to be on campus only one more week. And then he was starting a job as a accountant for Ford Motor Company in Dearborn. And so I got on the bus this one day at the end of school, full of books, and on my way home, and the bus was jam-packed full. Oh, wall-to-wall people. There was not another inch. People standing all over the place. He was in the back with his buddies, and with their golf clubs. And I got on the bus and I hear, hey, Shotzi, you want to go out tonight? I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know what Shotzi meant, and I said, just call me. So I went home and I called my girlfriend's mother, who was German. I said, he called me Shotzi. Is that a good term or is it a bad term? If it's good, I'll go out with him. If it's bad, I'm not. And she said, you can go out with him. It means sweetheart in German. So that was our first date. But I want to go back. I missed one point, and my brother, I told you, he did not get his degree because he couldn't make up those hours.
Yeah.
I felt that was very wrong. So I went to the dean of his department when I was on campus, and I begged the dean, please grant him his degree. He's earned it. He was doing the state of Michigan a favor by going to helping with the riots in Detroit. And I said, he's been in service all these years. He needs to have that degree granted. Well, the dean was very abrupt with me, and he couldn't get me out
Really?
fast enough. I was just a young kid, wasting his time. So I went home and I talked to my dad about it, and I said, I think Mother should go out there and tackle him. And I said, I think Mom could be the social worker and everything. She would have a lot more influence with him. So she finally said, I'll go out. And sure enough, the dean was very gracious to her. And he said, by all means, we will grant him his degree immediately. So his degree said 1944 or something rather than 1942 when he really graduated. Then he went on to be he couldn't get into medical school. So he went on to a dental school. He got into dental school at U of M. And he used that as he wanted to be a research doctor. And he became chief geneticist of the U.S. Public Health Service during his reign. And when he died, he was probably the world's chief authority on albinism. And he really,
All thanks to you, getting him his degree.
well,
Right?
I didn't get him the degree, my mother did. But he had to have that in order to apply
Right.
and he wanted to apply, so I wanted to get that in there. But anyway, I wanted to do one more World War II thing. After the war, we were in the 70s, I think, 1970s or something, and Zeke and I made a trip. By the way, my husband's name is really Earl. I should put that in, and I have two sons. But his name is really Richard Earl, but we call him Hum.
That's me.
Yeah, okay.
And Mark, my youngest son, 4 years apart. Great guys, great families. And I have two granddaughters and two grandsons. So Hum had two daughters and Mark had two sons. And we've got 4 great-grandchildren. So very lucky. All right, now where am I?
You just met your husband.
Oh, I met my husband, yes.
Yep.
And so one thing led to another. We started dating regularly right after that.
Now, you were in Lansing, he was in Dearborn, or did you move to Dearborn?
Yep.
How did that work?
That was the problem, because the first weekend he called and said, I'm now working full-time in Dearborn, and I can come up and I can live in the ATO house for this next weekend. There's room for me in the ATO house. The next weekend, when he called and said, you want me to come up and we'll go to the football game together? Yeah. He said, well, there's a problem. I don't have any place to stay. The ATO house is packed right now. There are no empty beds. So he said, do you think there'll be room at your house to stay? And I said, let me ask my mother. So she said, can Zeke stay here this weekend? And she said, yes, that'd be nice. So he came and stayed the weekend and got acquainted, and then he stayed, I think, the following weekend, and then Zeke called and said, well, Michigan State's going to pay me away. How about if you'd like to come down to Dearborn and meet my family, and you can stay with me for the weekend. So I did that, and I liked his family. He had mother, father, and older brother who was handicapped, and that brother was injured during his delivery. The midwife was drunk and injured his spinal column, and he could not talk. He had the ability to play games and things, but he couldn't talk. And mother, and then Zeke had two younger brothers, Jack and Bill. And Grandma Copp I admired Grandma Copp and Grandpa Copp. Grandpa Copp was also handicapped, he had his one arm that only grew to the elbow, and his fingers were attached at the elbow. So it was hard for him to use that arm, but he was able to get a job at Ford Motor Company during the war. And but Grandma kept Warren. Warren was a handicapped child, and he was he was 2 years older than Zeke. And Zeke kind of looked after his brother all the time, and when he went out to play, he'd take his brother with him, and they'd ride their trikes and things. And Zeke was very good to him, and took very good care of him. And Grandma and Grandpa were both orphaned when they were about 10, 12 years old. And
When you say grandma and grandpa, those are his parents?
yes, his grandma. Yeah.
Oh, his grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, his mother and dad.
Oh, his mother and dad, okay.
Yeah. And she kept Wardy home with her so that he could have a normal growing up life. And she didn't put him in Lapeer until he was 18. And he liked it there then because he could have friends to play with and play games with. But when he wanted to come home, he would just tell the social worker, he'd go like this, I want to go over the hills to my house. Grandma would drive up there and get him. But I thought that I felt very, very sorry for my father-in-law because I think his father abused him terribly. And he ran away from home when he was 15 years old, and he was finally picked up in Fort Wayne. And my nephew has found articles about in the Fort Wayne article about Grandpa being picked up and there, and that was pretty sad. But
Yeah.
Zeke said he remembers that his mother never took him to visit that man until they were in high school or college, able to fend for themselves because he was always swatting them around.
Yeah.
And Zeke said he remembers being swatted around like him, and I think he swatted Grandpa, my father-in-law, around a lot. And when they brought him home, he refused to go back home and live in the house with them. And the woman he married was a very young girl, and one of his dad's friends, the Clarks, and the Clark family took him in, and he lived with the Clark family until he graduated.
Okay.
And then went to Chicago, and that's when he met my mother-in-law. So,
And he grew up in Dearborn, your husband?
no, he grew up in Ferndale.
Oh, in Ferndale?
And they had a very hard time of it during the Depression. And that was another thing I want to bring out on the Depression, that we all went to school, in the Depression years. And it was all very, very hard on all of us. But the thing of it is, and Zeke says the same thing, we go to school and we play with all our friends. We never realized we were poor.
Right.
Everybody was poor.
Yeah.
So we were no different than anybody else, but we knew that we couldn't have new clothes or anything like that. My grandmother made all our clothes. And at Christmas time, Grandma never got any presents, and every present she got was all this fabric so that she could make more clothes for us.
Right.
And but as I say, nobody really realized.
You were still happy.
Everybody was the same boat. And Zeke had several paper routes, and that was the only thing that money that was coming into his house for quite a while there. Then he'd get up at 4 in the morning, get a early morning paper route. He'd go out and deliver his papers, then come back and have breakfast and change his clothes and go to school. And
Excuse me, I gotta go, Mom.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so good luck.
thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And they were behind in their rent in this one place, and they were being evicted. And Grandma, his mother said, "I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know where we're going to go, what we're going to do." And a couple of days later, Zeke was around collecting on his route, and he saw a sign for rent on a house, and he stopped right away and went up there and said, "Is this house for rent?" And this was in Ferndale, and they just a couple blocks from where they were living. And he said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "Well, I'd like to rent it for my mother and dad." He said, "Well, I've got to have a deposit on it." And he said, "How much do you need?" And the guy told him, I don't know what it was, but he had just made his collection from his paper route. And so he gave the man all the money that he had collected from the paper route, and got the deposit plate. And then went home and got his mother, and they lived there then until they were able to build a house in Ferndale, or in Dearborn. And that was, I think they moved there right during the war, right during
Right before he went to college, basically, or during
well,
college?
it was during, he was in service when they moved there.
Okay.
Yeah, he was pulled out of college, so, yeah.
So your husband served in the military?
Yes, he was also in my brother was in the aircraft division, and my husband, Earl, or Zeke, was in the Fifth Army also, Patton. But he was also a maintenance man, or, maintenance and repair man. His worst experience was the Battle of the Bulge, which was a horrible cold. It was the coldest weather that Germany had ever recorded. And they were trying to fight this battle. It was foggy, they couldn't tell where their lines were and where the German lines were. And so it was very difficult to try. Their guns froze up, and they couldn't get their anti-aircraft guns unfrozen. So they had to collect their urine in the morning. They all collected, saved their urine, and poured them on guns in order to get them firing, to get them thawed so they could fire them. And my husband said by afternoon the stench from those guns with all that urine on it was unbearable.
Yeah.
But he got sick and had pneumonia and couldn't go on with the troops as they moved on. And they didn't have room on the last Jeep going through, medical Jeep, picking up guys. They didn't have room for Zeke on there. So they put him in a bombed out farmhouse on the floor of the kitchen. It didn't have any windows or doors in it or anything. And they told him that they had marked him so that the medics would, when they could get the medics through, that they would be picking him up, but they didn't know when it would be. So he laid there, and that late afternoon, he said he's never so cold in his life.
Yeah.
Laying there, and two young girls came in, and come to find out the girls were the girls that lived in that house, their mother had sent them over to check the house to see what damage had been done to it. And they found Zeke on the floor. And they went home and told their mother, said they was very cold. And they got him a great big long, huge long scarf, came back, and they wrapped it around Zeke's neck and breast, chest and things. And he said, oh, was that God said, having that warm scarf around his neck and chest. And then they came over twice a day for the next 3 days and fed them. They said it was soup, but it was like warm diluted water. They didn't have any food either.
Right.
They were so scarce of food, and they were just cooking up anything they could and calling it soup, but at least they got some warm liquid into them. And then the medics finally came and picked him up. But again, there wasn't room in the Jeep for him, so they put him on the hood. And Zeke said there was nothing for him to hang on to. And he was trying to hang on so tight, and he says these darn fools driving the Jeep wouldn't slow down when they came to a corner, and they'd take these corners at 30 miles an hour or 40. Zeke said I'd go flying in the ditch. And every time they'd have to stop and pick me up, and Zeke kept hollering, you darn fools, slow down so I can hang on. I can't hang on. And they wouldn't do it, and they kept saying, no, we don't know where the Germans are. We want to get the hell out of here. And so it was, he finally got on the Jeep, and they finally got him to the field hospital. And he said that in the bed next to him, all the doctors and nurses were huddling around the soldier next to him. And finally he asked one of the nurses, what's going on with the guy next to me? And she said, oh, he's so frozen. She said, he's just so pitiful. He was shot, and he fell forward into the snow and face down. So he was facing, face down there, and he laid there. And of course he had to urinate and things, and that all froze. And that froze all his private parts and his whole face and everything.
He was still alive?
And he was still alive, and they were trying desperately to save him.
Yeah.
And Zeke never knew how he came out, but he was doing better. Zeke said when he was sent back to his company. But they said there were many, many injuries like that, especially in that Battle of the Bulge.
Right.
That guys would fall forward and then freeze.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
So let's get back to after the war now.
Okay.
So you're meeting your husband.
Yeah. Then we got married. Then we met in summer school and got married the following August.
Where did you get married?
In Lansing.
In Lansing?
Yeah, at St. Paul's Church.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was the hottest day on record, the hottest August 28th on record, and it still holds today. And my mother passed out, and oh gosh, it was so hot. But anyway, we got married. I won't go into the honeymoon because it was the worst honeymoon I've ever had. And I would never go again, but...
Well, where did you go? Just with a year?
Pardon?
Was it in Michigan?
Yes, we went to Niagara Falls.
Oh,
Everybody
okay.
goes to Niagara Falls, but Zeke made no reservation. So we got to Niagara Falls, and there was no reservation any place. We couldn't find a place. And we finally found this one gas station, and he said, well, he's got a room up above his gas station, but it's for truckers when they come through and they want to spend the night. And so we drove on, and finally it was after midnight, and we went back to the gas station. We still don't have a place. Can we stay in the trucker's room? Okay, so that night we stayed up above.
It was real high class, huh?
Real high class.
Right.
It was so mangy that I wouldn't walk on the floor. I walked from the bed to the dresser to the bathroom. Anyway, so then the next night, he said we're going up to, well, the first night I should say, we went to see his buddy, Mose Kramer, in Akron, Michigan. And they couldn't make the wedding because she was due to have a baby any day. And I stayed with his parents and he stayed with them. So anyway, then the third night, he said, no, we're going into the Royal York. I think that's in Ottawa, the Royal York. And
That's a nice hotel?
beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful, the best hotel.
Not a trucker's.
Yeah, oh, it was the best hotel, and we walked right in just like we were gonna stay there. And Zeke said, I'd like a room, and they said, are you kidding? This is the Canadian Exhibition Week. We've been booked for a year. There's no rooms anyplace. And he said, now down in the lobby is some people with a desk that have private rooms that you can stay in their homes. Go down there and get a private room in one of their homes. So we went down there, got a room, supposedly in a private home. It was sure an experience. It was a house of ill repute. And here we are walking in there, and here are these girls and the doors with their long lingerie on and everything. And
Just what you wanted on your honeymoon, right?
Yeah, and they kept saying, look at this guy, he brought his own girl and everything. And what are we gonna do for business? And,
Right.
oh my God. We went then to dinner at 11 o'clock at night, and I started crying. And we were using my mother and dad's Oldsmobile for our trip. And so I said to him, I'm going, and tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to take the Oldsmobile and I'm going back to Lansing. Now you are welcome to ride with me if you want to, or you can stay home here and get home any way you want. But I am not going to live like this. I said, I have never lived like this with my mother and father, nor have I had to.
Right.
And I'm not going to live with you like this.
Set the tone, right?
Yeah, so anyway, by morning he said, honey, we're going on to Montreal, I think it was. And he said, we're going to have a much better day. And so that was, we had a much better time after that. But
Good.
anyway, that was the honeymoon. Going on to one other thing I wanted to stress about World War II. When we went to Amsterdam, we met Papa. As I was telling you, we did the trades and everything. And Papa said when the war ended, he said everybody was jubilant. And he said that I was standing in the corner crying because the Nazis had left them in complete disarray.
Yeah.
They couldn't grow any crops because they'd swelled. They'd drained oil all over
All of the land.
the land, and they couldn't grow any crops, and that oil so and they had stripped their land of any kind of oil or wood or anything to heat their homes or cook with. He said we had no way of eating or cooking or growing food, so we were going to either starve or both. And he said within weeks, he said the most beautiful sight he ever saw. He looked in the harbor, and there comes these huge cargo ships from America filled with food and flour and beef and potatoes and oil and everything that they needed.
Yeah.
And he said and he said ship after ship arrived. And it was due to the Marshall Plan. And Marshall, I believe, was a General Marshall, but he was no longer active duty, and he was serving in the government then at that time. And Marshall came up with this plan to ship all these supplies to Europe, to any country who wanted to enroll in the Marshall Plan. And that Marshall Plan, every country in Europe applied for it, except with Russia did not. And Russia had a very hard time afterwards because they were lacking food and supplies too. But the plan was that we would ship all these things to Europe and to all the countries that wanted to participate, which most everyone did. And then I think it was about at 10 years or something like that, that the governments were supposed to start paying back to the United States some of the cost of the food and everything we sent to them. I think the Netherlands repaid in full, and there were a few others that paid in full, but most of them paid only partial payments, and some countries didn't pay anything. And I think the United States, after a certain length of time, had just dismissed their bill. But Papa said the people in the Netherlands were so grateful and so happy to have that Marshall Plan. And he said, I want you to go home and tell every young person in America that you see what your country did for Europe. You kept us alive. You kept us in food and shelter and so forth. And he said, tell people about the Marshall Plan. They don't know about it. And so this is why I wanted to mention it today.
Yeah.
That it was a wonderful thing, and then the Netherlands sent a thank you back to America, and it was a carillon, and I believe it's in the memorial in Washington, D.C., where the World War II memorial is and the Korean War memorial is, and it's just up the hill. They put the carillon just up the hill from the Korean monuments. And Zeke and I climbed the hill to see it, and that's an grateful appreciation to the people of America from the people of the Netherlands. You will never be forgotten, and our thanks to you.
Yeah.
So that made me feel good, and I do want to spread the word about what the
Proud to be an American.
Yeah, proud to be American, that's right. So anyway, moving on, we moved to Syracuse, our first house in Dearborn. It was a great street. Everybody on the street was from some college or university. And we
A lot of forward people.
Oh yeah, all veterans. They
Okay.
sold only to veterans. And they wanted veterans to be college graduates or in college. And it was crazy because Zeke was president of the Michigan State Alumni Club, and we lived in the middle of the block. Up at the other end of the street was Frank Beauvais, who was a president of the U of M Alumni Club. And down at the other end of the street was Clem, who was president of Notre Dame club.
So you had the whole Big Ten represented on the block, huh?
Yeah, and we had more fun. And the boys started thinking, what can we do? And so they decided to combine the three clubs and have a triune dance. And that was held each year between Christmas and Thanksgiving, and it was such a big. Oh, we had it at the Dearborn Inn, nice orchestra, nice facility, and people were calling in the summer for tickets. We were running out of tickets every day, every year.
Yeah.
And it was a very popular affair. And but we soon outgrew the house. It was only 2 bedrooms, and so we and 2 small closets, so in the living room and kitchen. So we decided that we would like to go out to. We couldn't find any new houses in Dearborn. There were no new houses here. So we'd like to go out to the Farmington area. I had seen an ad in the magazine for the houses, some Patterson Cherokee houses that were for sale out in Briar Hill and Farmington. So we went out there. And we kept saying, oh, this is such a long way out, you know. And there were no paved streets other than Orchard Lake was paved. And so anyway, when I was telling my friends that we were going to think about moving, and I was getting ready to sign a contract, but I wanted to sign a contract in the school district where I was going to be. And so I signed a contract
You're talking about a work contract? For work?
Yes, I had back when I was, after I had the children, Zeke went to Wayne State and got his master's degree, and when he finished, he said, now it's your turn. So I went over to Eastern Michigan and backtracked and started all over again to get my teaching to start.
Okay.
So I had my degree from Eastern Michigan then for teaching. And when I went to tell my friends that we were going to Farmington, and they said, why would you go there? Everybody in Dearborn thought that Dearborn schools were the elite of all of Oakland County.
Okay.
They were the elite of Michigan. And they kept saying, why would you take your children out of the Dearborn schools? What are you doing? And I'd lie awake at night thinking, what am I doing to my children? Well, then I decided to talk to my friend Ken Lockman, who was a principal here at that time, a very well-known principal at a Middle Belt School and Beechwood School.
So in Farmington?
In Farmington.
Okay.
And I talked to him, and he said, Fran, we've got a great school district out here. And he said, it's really a bread and butter type program. We stress reading, math, and science are the 3 that we, stress in the elementary. And he said, you're going to get a good education. He said, if you're not sold on it, come on out here, and I will arrange to have you substitute in these various schools, and you can see for yourself. So I did, and his sister, I called it the Lockman District, because Ken was at that time principal at Middle Belt School. His sister was principal at Wooddale School. His mother taught at 10 Mile School, and his cousin taught in Farmington High. So I called it the Lockman District. But he got me into all these different schools, and I particularly enjoyed working with his sister Doris. And I got a whole new picture of,
the school
schools,
district.
and I felt very comfortable. But when I went to sign my contract, there were just 3 people running the school district. Just 3 people. The superintendent, and I can't remember his name, but Mr. Vanamine was assistant superintendent in charge of personnel and all the personnel problems. And Minnie Zilke, who was, I don't know how Minnie Zilke did it, but she was in charge of curriculum, special ed, anything else in the district Minnie had to handle.
Okay.
So she had so many hats, and she was a great administrator. And people would say to me, "Well, you've got a school board. They're made of farmers. You want farmers telling you what to do and so on and so forth." Well, that was not true. Yes, there were some farm people on the Board of Education, but there were also, business people and
Right.
other people from the community on it. So that
What
was
year was this?
1959.
That's when you moved to Farmington?
We moved to Farmington in 1959.
Okay.
And we moved to Briar Hill. And we got the same Milner, Patterson, Sharkey that I saw in the magazine.
The magazine you're talking about, was that when Life featured Farmington in Life magazine? I think that was in the 50s.
It was just like in Good Housekeeping or
Yeah, okay,
something
just a
like
local
that.
or
And I
whatever.
was in the doctor's office and I went through and I was looking and I thought, oh, houses being built in Farmington. And that's how I got,
Okay.
and we went out there. And
Is that subdivision that you're talking about, is that in downtown Farmington?
it was at 13 Mile Road
Okay.
and on Farmington Road. And at that corner, there was a great big tree that grew up in the center of the road. So when you got to 13 Mile and Farmington Road, which was where Antioch Church was, still is,
Okay.
except it's not Antioch anymore, and you had to go around the tree in order to get to Briar Hill, and then the next street to your right was Briar Hill.
Okay.
But the school board was very astute at that time. They realized that the land, there were a great number of farms all around the district. And the farms were being bought up very rapidly by these developers. The main one was Thompson Brown. And Thompson Brown were building behind all the free land that they could get, and they built Kendallwood 1, Kendallwood 2, Kendallwood 3, and Kendallwood 4 over off 14 Mile Road.
Yeah.
And the school board could see. They were, as I say, very astute and farsighted. They could see that with all these subdivisions going up, they're going to need schools, and they were not equipped. They had to have more schools. So they had a discussion about, and I remember that discussion. They didn't want any more schools built on main roads like the old Bond School at 13 Mile and Orchard Lake.
Okay.
It's now an office building, but that was built at, and the Eagle School was built at Middle Belt at 14, and the Middle Belt was on Middle Belt Road. They didn't want any more elementary schools built on main roads. They said their ideal place for schools is in the center of each square mile. So they were very cagey. They asked a couple of business people to go out and scout out any free land in the center of each square mile, and that would be adequate to build an elementary school and playground. So they went out and they did a marvelous job of finding land that was still available in the centers of each square mile. And they were, as they say, they were very cagey about it, because when they went to buy the land, they had these gentlemen buy the land and then give it to the school board.
Gotcha.
Because they didn't want the sellers to know
what
that they
was
were
going on.
buying it for the schools, because then they thought they would up the price for them. but they got a forest school, was right in the, pretty much in the square. It was right in between 14 and 13 Mile, Drake and Farmington.
Okay.
Beechview School was built in the middle of
Lanigan, that must be one of them. That's where my kids went to
Yeah.
elementary, is at Lanigan.
Yeah, so that was another one that they site that they got. Kenbrook was another site in the middle, but that was already built when we got out here. But it was part of that philosophy. We want schools in the center. And Fairview School over there on 14 Mile.
What about William Grace? That's
Yeah, that became Shiawassee School, didn't it not?
yeah. They actually took it down now. It's actually a dog park.
Well, and that's the problem. They took down Wooddale School too.
Yeah.
And Fairview School. All of them are knocked down. And then they built Power School. They wanted someplace in that site, but they couldn't find anything available, so they took the property behind Gill School and
Yeah.
built Power there. So they did a good job of locating schools.
I went to kindergarten at Gill.
Oh, did you really?
Then we moved to Howell after that, though, and I went to school in Howell. But
Did you ever know a Mrs. Rubin at Howell Schools?
no, I don't
I think
remember.
Angie had her.
Okay.
But she was Arnie Rubin's wife, and Arnie Rubin was principal at Eagle School, and I worked there as a sub. I worked for 28 or 29 years in kindergarten.
Oh, okay.
Then I retired because my husband was retiring, and I was 62 then, and then retired with him because we wanted to travel,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to be home alone.
Okay.
So I said,
Is that what you did? Travel?
So we did. We traveled, and so then when we came back from our trip to Australia and New Zealand, we were there 3 months, and Mr. Vanderbeek called me and said, "Fran, would you come back and consider subbing for us?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "We really are desperate for subs, particularly from the fall to February." He said, "After that, we can get our student teachers certified to sub. But we need subs desperately." So I thought, oh, well, I'll try it. Well, 24 years later, I'm retired. I had around 50 years. And
You did another 24 years after that?
Yeah. And then I subbed in K through 5th grade. But I liked it K through 4th the best. And then when I got through the subbing, I decided I had to get out of the regular classroom. And that was when I was 80 years old.
Okay.
I decided I was too
That was
old.
enough.
Well, I couldn't keep up with the technology.
Yeah.
The technology was getting more than I could handle. And that's where the Farmington School District fell down. They did not, they taught the teachers, but they didn't include the subs.
Oh, okay.
And when we're left every day to go in and face these problems, we need to be educated
Yeah.
too on how this equipment works. And I didn't feel that I could handle it anymore. After my eyesight was getting very bad. I had macular degeneration, and I was rapidly losing my eyesight.
What year did you retire then?
Well, I was 85 when I retired.
Okay.
I worked the next 5 years in preschool and Head Start. And then preschool in Alameda there, the early childhood center. That was a great center, and it still is. And Farmington's done a wonderful job at early childhood centers there. And I could.
So that wasn't that long ago.
No, I could handle the children all right, but I didn't. I had to have a younger person, a younger aide with me, and they always had a younger aide in those rooms. And because I couldn't see them on the playground, and I couldn't see where they were going or if they were in the woods
How far
or
away,
what.
yeah.
I needed somebody out there that could see them and know whether I got all my kids or what.
Yeah.
And so that's where I felt comfortable in working in the preschool for another 5 years. I thought I only worked 4 years, but Mr. Kula, my tax man, said, "No, you worked when you were 85. I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, I got a W-2 for you." You did.
You did.
So I guess I retired at 85. So, and I liked the fact that Farmington, when I was working there, they've done away with them, I guess, now, but I think it's a crime. But we had a parapro with us, and I had some wonderful parapros.
What is that?
Teacher's aide,
Oh, okay.
and we call them paraprofessionals.
Gotcha.
And I just had some. Laura Lippman was one of the ones that I was telling you about, whose father we met in Amsterdam. And Nancy Cook, who was a Farmington. Nancy and Dick Cook are very well known in Farmington area. And he was a teacher and she was a paraprofessional, and she worked with me my last year that I worked. And so,
So a paraprofessional didn't have to be a teacher?
No.
Okay.
Dolores Rao was really good and married her, and I really was lucky to have a group. And I was at Forest School, but I started out in the old Bond School, and I was supposed to go with Ken Lockman over at he was at Middle Belt then, or Beechview, maybe Beechview then. And I was supposed to go at his school. And then somebody called Minnie Zilke and said, "Don't send Fran to Ken Lockman because they're good buddies from Michigan State and they're good drinking buddies." So, I didn't drink at all then. I didn't even like beer. But we did chum with the same group.
Right.
And he was a roommate of one of our best friends, John Brandenburg, who ended up as superintendent out in Grand Ledge. But Ken was badly injured in the war and had lost the use of his one arm. And he was so helpful to me, though. So the 2 days before school started, I got a call saying, "You're not going to Beechview. You're going to go a half a day at Kenbrook and a half a day at afternoons at Bond." So I had to commute between the two, and that was difficult. And I had some difficulty at the Kenbrook school. I loved the staff. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Jim Nuttall, and he was running the library, and he was also, we didn't have any, resources for giving children added help if they were needing and reading and so forth. And he devised some tools to help those kids, and he was tutoring those kids on the side. And Jim passed away as a young man, and but they still incorporated a lot of Jim's techniques with
the tutoring
and over the years as they developed a reading a program. They have, right now they have, I still think they have them, I hope so. But people that come in and do nothing but help take children out of classes and give them that and
So a
support
little,
and
little
reading.
support, yeah.
Yeah. And but there was, when I went to Kenbrook, we had Mrs. Seidel, and she was very elderly. Listen to me, very elderly. I don't think she was any older than I am right now, but anyway, she had, the philosophy was totally different than mine, and I just came out of college, and my philosophy was you give the kids breaks, you give them outside and let them run off steam, or 10, 15, 20 minutes, and they had a lovely playground over there, but Mrs. Seidel never wanted the kids going out to play except at lunch hour. And I felt sorry for the kids because we had no lunchroom at Kenbrook then. And then I don't think they ever really got a lunchroom. I don't know when I left with somebody, they were eating the lunch in the gym and putting out portable tables, and they ate in the gym. But prior to that, they ate in the hall right opposite her office, and she never allowed any talking. So the kids couldn't talk in the classrooms, and the kids couldn't talk at lunch hour, and I kept saying, when are these kids going to get to know each
crazy.
other? And then she didn't want us taking them outside to play because they might get hurt, and it takes too long to get them dressed. That's another thing. When I went to Farmington, we had 38 kids in a class. I had 38 kindergartners in the morning and 38 kids in the mod school in the afternoon. That was a tremendous
Yeah, it's a lot.
class load. You can't get to everybody.
Right.
And we had our problem kids. I had one boy that was, when he got to be third grade, was committed to an institution, and I had him all year.
Yeah, it makes it hard for the other
It
kids.
was terrible.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. Jack Cleveland was also a principal here, but then he went up north of, I think, Fort Huron someplace, as a superintendent. And Jack came to me when he was still in Farmington, and he said, I want to do a study on children that have been in a classroom where language was encouraged. I had to shut the kids down every now and then. They were too noisy, but I let them pretty much talk among themselves because I knew that was a big help in developing language development and reading and understanding and so forth. And so he said, I want to do a study on your kids, and then I'm going to do a study on another teacher's kids who believes that the kids should not talk and have freedom to talk in the classroom, which was kind of the philosophy at
The other teacher.
Kenbrook.
Yeah.
And so I said, fine. And after 2 years, he followed the kids for 2 years. And after 2 years, my kids scored higher than the other classroom by far. And the things that they found was that they had, when they were allowed to talk and develop vocabulary, that they had better reading skills. And the biggest thing was that the comprehension, that they could understand what they were reading better, and that carried right on through to their reading
the rest of their
development.
life, right?
Yeah. And so that was an interesting fight. But anyway, that's
So what other? You haven't told me like what you like to do. Like, what did you have any clubs you were in, or any good friend? Did you do things?
Well,
What did you do?
we did. I gotta mention the car. We there was one other cute story I want to tell you about Jim Nunnell. We were Jim and two other teachers and I were all taking night classes after school over in Eastern Michigan, and Jim said, "I'll drive us every night." We went once a week over there. "I'll drive us every night, every week, to and from. If you girls will take turns making our sandwiches and packing our lunches so we don't have to buy lunch over there." And so we said, "That's fine." So it was my turn to bring the lunch.
Okay.
I overslept that morning, and I had not packed the lunch the night before, and I yelled at my husband, Zeke, get out of the bed. Get out of bed right now, get down there and make sandwiches for all of us. Hurry up. I've overslept, and I gotta get my shower in, and blah, blah, blah." So he trudged down in his pajamas and made the sandwiches and packed them all up, and I grabbed them and ran out and ran to school and put them in the refrigerator. Grabbed them after school, and I spread them out on the table when we got there, and while I went to buy coffee and drinks for everybody. When I came back, they were all sitting there looking at their sandwiches, and I said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Well, look at them." And my husband had taken a serrated knife and cut a bite mark out of each sandwich. And then on top of that, he went and got my food coloring, and brushed food coloring on top of the bite mark so it looked like lipstick on the sandwiches. And they're all sitting there looking. Nobody would eat them. And I said, "I can guarantee they're okay."
Right.
But I said, "I don't want you to eat them if you're not comfortable," because my husband is a clown, and he's the biggest clown ever, and this is his way to get back at me.
Right.
So anyway.
Was he was always a jokester?
Oh, he was.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You would love him. You
That's
would have
funny.
loved him. He had everybody laughing all the time. And when I got home, then I had to take the sandwiches up and pack them back up, and I ate the sandwich. And when I got them hamburgers and fries and stuff, and I said, "Well, Smarty, you cost me a lot of money. I had to go buy everybody hamburgers and fries because they wouldn't eat your sandwiches." And he said, "Good." He said, "Now maybe you'll get out of bed and fix your own damn sandwiches."
Oh, that's a good one.
Anyway, that was just one story of it, but I tried to lost my train of thought then.
We were just talking. What about?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a very active social life. When we moved to Briar Hill, we were looking for, I was looking for an opportunity to get acquainted with my neighbors. Zeke was getting acquainted with everybody because he was in the men's bowling league, and everybody in the men's group were all bowling, and they got along well, and he knew everybody and I didn't know anybody, but I was teaching in the same school.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of...
You knew all their kids. You just didn't know.
I knew all the children, but I didn't know any of the adults, and I think the adults kept me at an arm's pace, arm's length.
Yeah.
And because they didn't, know me. And so anyway, then we had formed four couples, Pratts and Holmes and Copps and the Wakelands. And Wakelands were friends of ours from Dearborn. They lived down the street from us. And all the while Zeke was in service. I think I forgot to mention that right after we moved in our Dearborn house, 3 weeks after, he was taken back into the Korean War.
Oh, no, you didn't.
And so I was there with the baby. No telephone, no nothing.
Yeah.
John Wakeland, I didn't know him at all, but the first snowfall came and I looked when I was going out to shovel my walk and things, and it was all done. I thought, geez, who's done this? And the next snowfall came and I looked out and there was this man shoveling my walk. And I hollered out, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm your neighbor. I live 3 doors down. I'm John Wakeland." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And I said, "For doing this." And I said, "Do you like coffee?" And he said, "Yeah, I love it." And I said, "Well, finish it and then come in and we'll get acquainted." And I didn't meet Ruth, and that was in the winter, and I didn't meet Ruth, his wife, until it was May, I think it was. I finally met her. And she was a home ec teacher. And over in Birmingham, Groves, I think. And she was delightful. And they became our very best friends at that point. And we were best friends until they passed away here a few years back. They lived in Florida, so we didn't get to see them much after they moved to Florida, but we did get there. But
So
anyway,
you started a couples group with them?
Yeah.
Later?
That we formed a gourmet club. So the 4 of us. And what it was is the hostess was supposed to determine what kind of a dinner we were going to have, and she would fix the meat, and then the rest of us were to follow the recipes she gave us for other
side
dishes.
Yeah.
And we did fairly well, not real good, but we did fairly well, until we came to the Thanksgiving dinner, and we were having an original Thanksgiving dinner, and she fixed the lobster, which was really good. But the other dishes, oh my gosh, Joe, they were terrible.
Terrible?
Absolutely horrible. We couldn't eat them all. Couldn't eat anything. And we were over at Wakeland's house over in Birmingham, and they had off-white carpeting. And here was all the food was sitting on the table. Nobody wanted it. John went to his garage, got out his wheelbarrow, wheeled it over Ruth's off-white carpeting to the dining room table. And one by one, he would pick up the dish and said, "I think this dish needs to go in the garbage." And plopped down in the wheelbarrow went. And so he took the whole dinner and threw it in the wheelbarrow. And then he said, "Now, I vote that we abolish the gourmet club." And he said, "I think we should go out to dinner." And everybody agreed.
So from then on?
And so I said to Zeke, "Well, that doesn't sound like much fun if you're just always just going out to dinner. As you're going to the same places and, so forth." So we thought about it, and I said, "You know what?" They came home. I said, "I got an idea. Let's make it a mystery club. We don't know what we're going to do.
Okay.
And it's up to the hostess to decide, and they don't tell you." So we each invited another 4 or 5 couples. We had about 12 couples originally. And we assigned them a month. We didn't meet every month, but we assigned them each month for a month that they had to decide what we were going to do for mystery. And we were told only how much it was going to cost and what to wear, and that was it. and we were given an emergency telephone number because we all had small children.
Yeah.
So someone, there was some adult in one of the houses that knew where to reach us and so forth.
Gotcha.
That we could leave an emergency number with them. And that we formed that club in 1962. And do you know that remnants of it is still going? We went regularly right up until COVID started.
Really?
And by that time, we lost 2 or 3 other members of our club. And we lost Jenny Beal, she died in 2019. And she was acting as secretary to it and made kept all notes on it.
Yeah,
and
took
so
care of
forth
everything.
and so forth. And we had so many people come in and join the club, and then we started off with just Briar Hill people, plus the Wakelands from Birmingham. And then over the years, there were so many people that from outside the Briar Hill that wanted to become members. And we wanted it, so we opened it up, and one time we had probably 24, 30 people.
That's cool.
And they say, the women always last longer than the men. Well, in our mystery club, it wasn't that way. The women were dying off and leaving the men, alone. And so right now, there's a few men that are still alive, and they still meet. They meet over at the Farmington Country Club when it's open.
Okay.
They meet on Wednesdays over there, and they still get together, the few guys that are still left, and there's only about 4 of them. And but that's all that's left of the mystery club. But,
Maybe you could hook me up with them so I could talk to them.
pardon?
Maybe you could hook me up with them sometime so I could talk with them. Get the whole club.
I don't think the 3 guys that are left were newer members, so they don't probably have the background
Yeah.
to it, and I don't think Larry would either at this point.
Gotcha.
With their age and everything, they're just not. But we had a lot of fun, and that everybody knew the mystery club, and
It sounds exciting.
it was.
Yeah.
And it was a great way to we had so many fun things. We did so many things. One fellow was with the FBI, and he arranged meeting them, through the prisons or jails and stuff. And Larry was a executive at WXYZ and got us into a lot of
Behind the scenes.
performing arts
Okay.
places.
Gotcha.
And then we got to go through the back, dressing rooms and
Yeah.
meet the staff and so forth. And we laughed so much because Larry had his picture taken when Ronnie Reagan was coming into town. And he had his picture taken with Reagan, and it was a lovely picture. And I asked him to make us a copy because Jim Maureen and his wife also had their picture taken with Carter.
Okay.
And so Jimmy Carter, so we had their picture in our hallway along with Larry Beal's picture with Ronnie Reagan.
Balance it out a little bit.
And so he Larry had given, he said, gee, maybe my brother and sister-in-law would like a picture of it. And his long friend and Zeke would like it. Maybe they'd like it. So he had a copy of he and Reagan, and he gave it to his brother and sister-in-law, not realizing they were dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. And so the brother,
They sent it back.
Just about the brother and the sister-in-law moved to a new condo. So Larry and Ginny and their two kids went down to see the new condo, and they're in their bedroom were all these pictures, like dime store pictures of all the Kennedys and all
Right.
the Democrats over their beds, and they handed Ginny and Larry the pictures of he and Reagan back, and he said, we don't have any place for it. Oh gosh, we left them from that.
Right.
So much.
That's funny.
Yeah. So we kind of got even too, because Zeke had sent a picture of our family to one of his buddies who was that he had liked, and it was buddies of his from high school and college. And the buddy sent that back saying he had no need for it. So we called Liddy and Ginny and Larry right away. We said, well, we got the same treatment. We got,
Yeah.
you know, so anyway.
Did you ever meet any famous people or anything like that? Or what was the most exciting person you ever met that you were excited?
Anyone?
Like exciting people or anyone famous or anybody like that you were real excited to meet?
We probably did, but I probably don't remember it.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that I did, I got to testify before the legislature, the education committee. They about 20, 30 years ago, they were trying to get the birth date moved back to July 1st,
Okay.
rather than the December 1st. Those children were just too young for kindergarten. And so I did go up there and testify there. That was very exciting and very nerve-wracking. But also, I was called one time to talk about the changes, rapid changes that came in Farmington, and how all of a sudden it just exploded from 1959 to 1960. The next 20 years, it just bloomed so rapidly. And I was asked, I got a call from, I can't remember which station it was, but they said they were doing a story on the rapid growth of Farmington, and could I talk to them about what we'd seen and experienced since we moved there, which was the whole picture.
Time. Yeah.
And so we had just moved in recently. We had built a house. We sold our house in Briar Hill, and we built a house in Hunters Point, which is the next subdivision down on Fox Club Drive. And it was my dream house. But I could not get through my head. There were so many names of streets and things by the name of Fox. We had Fox Grove, Fox Run, Fox Hills, Fox, everything was Fox, Fox, Fox. And I could not remember that we lived on Fox Club Drive. And the name of our subdivision was Hunters Point. And I could not remember that because there were a lot of hunts, hunt club, fox hunt, there were a lot of hunts around there too.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have it in my mind. I couldn't get it straight
Couldn't get it
where I
stuck,
lived or what, anyway. So I met my girlfriend, my best teaching buddy was Barb Nevadas, and she always went with me. She was principal at a couple of Shiawassee School and Wood Creek. And so I called her quick and I said, meet me on the lawn of the City Hall. They're going to interview me this noon for a show that they're doing. So she rushed right out and met me down there. And I was so happy with what I could remember about the early days of their Farmington there.
Yeah.
And how we had no streets and, paved streets and no stores. So we had to go to 10 Mile Road for our nearest store. And there was, everything was a dirt road and
10 Mile and what? Where would you go?
a 10 Mile in Orchard Lake.
Okay.
And anyway, that was our nearest store. And so I was telling him about that between 12 and 13 Mile Road on the west side of the street was a airport. It was a small airport, and there were hangars all along Orchard Lake Road, and some of those hangars are still in use.
Really?
Yeah, if you go by, you can see a car repair shop in there of some kind, and then down below they made a strip mall out of it.
Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
But if you look closely at the buildings as you go slowly through there, you can still see some of the buildings that were the hangars there. But anyway, I was so pleased that I thought, oh gosh, I'm doing a great job. That's what I was in it mentally. Then the announcer or the interviewer said to me, well, where do you live? And I drew a complete blank.
Fox something.
Fox Hunt. I could not come out with it. I could not. And I was saying everything under the sun. And Barb just collapsed in laughter. And I looked at her. She was rolling on the ground with her good clothes on, holding her sides, rolling with laughter. The cameraman was laughing. And you could hear him laughing. And I thought, how am I going to get out of this? I don't even know where I live. Finally, I said to her, could you please ask me an easier question? That night we went home, and usually they edit out all
the bad part.
Yeah. This time they
left it right.
They just
well,
left
that was
it in.
funny.
It was too funny.
Probably was the best viewing of the night.
And so we watched it once, and I said to my husband, delete that. I don't ever want anybody to see it.
I'll have to see if I can pull the footage up somewhere.
Right. Oh gosh, that was so bad. But anyway, we toured all. My husband went to all 7 continents. I only went to 6 because I would not go to Antarctica with him.
Okay.
I didn't want to. I get seasick in a canoe, and you have to go through the roughest water in the world to get there. They went on an icebreaker from Russia, out of South America, the tip of South America, and they had to go through the convergence of 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Southern Ocean, all come in there together. And the water gets so high, the waves sometimes get so high that they're the highest waves that's recorded in the world. And they said that they strap you down for the 12 hours that it takes to get you through there, that they strap you in your bed so you don't roll off. And I said, I'm paying good money. This is costing me good money to be seasick. Although I have to go both ways, going and coming. And then when I get there, all I'm gonna do is smell all those stinking penguins.
Right.
I love penguins, but they're stinky
Okay.
and
Probably cold.
all cold, yeah. And they had a wonderful time. Hub went with them instead. So they had a wonderful time, and it was a good trip, and he was glad he went. But
So even though you worked those last 20 years, you were still able to do some traveling?
oh, we did. We would travel right up to the last, I guess, 2015 or so. He died.
Is that when your husband passed away?
I fell in 2015.
Oh, okay.
It broke my shoulder, my hip, and my pelvis. And then I've been on a walker since then.
Gotcha.
And yeah, we traveled so many times to our first trip over there was in when I was 62, when we made our first trip to Australia and New Zealand, and we stopped at Fiji. We were stopped at many islands going over. We had a trip planned that we got a plane that would let us get off and spend 4 or 5 days, and so we stopped in Hawaii and someplace else, and then Fiji.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, and when we were in Fiji, we met this delightful couple that were newly married and from Australia. And I didn't know about, coral, or in the ocean, coral. It was so hot there. Oh my gosh, and I was looking for some place to cool off so you could go out fishing. And I thought the pool was not cool at all.
Yeah.
It was hot, so maybe the ocean would be better. So I went wading out in the ocean, and it was nearing, the sun was going low in the sky, and I couldn't see the coral. I didn't even know what it was. And I heard somebody holler, "Stop, stop, don't go another step, I'm coming for you." And this gentleman came up behind me and took my hand, and he said, "If you go another step, you're gonna get all cut up with this coral, and you're gonna be sorry." And he said, "I'm pulling you back, just follow me." So we got back up on the land, and he said, "Do you want a stubby?" And I didn't know what a stubby was, but it sounded good. So he said, "Yeah." So he said, "Okay." And he said, we went up to the bar, and they were little jars of beer.
It's a drink? Okay.
And so he said, "My wife will be down. She's taking a shower and trying to cool off, and she'll be down shortly." I said, "Well, my husband is out fishing, and he'll be back in shortly." Well, we just bonded like that, and we spent all the rest of our time on Fiji with this couple, and they enjoyed it too. We hiked together over to other resorts, and we just had a really good time. And they said, "Now when you get to Australia, you be sure and call us and come and spend some time with us in our home in Australia." So we did, and we've been close friends ever since then.
That's nice.
And it's been so nice. And they had 2 little boys that were just adorable, and they brought them to our house a couple of times. The last time they were in our house was, I think, 2016. And after I broke my shoulder and arms, we always said to the boys, the Australian boys, "We're your American grandparents." Sue's folks lived quite a ways away, and Greg's parents were not very understanding of the children. Greg would bring them over to let them see them, and they wouldn't let them in the house.
Okay.
And Sue said, no matter what I send them at Christmas, they send it back. They had sent them to pitch tickets, I think it was to Mamma Mia, and lunch at the opera house that was playing then, and they sent it back but after the expiration date, they sent the tickets back saying that they couldn't have lunch at the time that they wanted to have lunch, so they couldn't use the tickets or anything. So anyway, we said, well, to the boys, you know that you always have American grandparents, and when they came the first time, they were taking them to Disney World, and so Zeke gave them money to buy their tickets to Disney World for the boys, and that was fun. And when they were here in 2016, when I got out of the hospital from breaking my shoulder and everything, my first outing was out to Hub's house, and he said, I want you to come out, we got a surprise for you. And I walked in, and there was nobody around, and there stood in the kitchen was Tom, their oldest boy. And I said, oh my gosh, I just started crying when I saw him. I was so tickled. And
Yeah.
He was such a cool kid, and so nice. And unfortunately, about 5 years later, I think it was in 2019, Tom was out with some guys, and I don't know what happened, but anyway, he fell and got a brain concussion and died. And it was on his father's birthday on the 20th of December, just before Christmas. And that poor family, we just, I don't know when our family was so handicapped by a death as that one was.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop crying. My granddaughter Katie couldn't stop crying. She had to call her. She was supposed to be in Kalamazoo or Chicago for meetings, and she couldn't go because she couldn't get herself under control. And Zeke, my husband, just sat there for, I think, for a week straight on the edge of the bed with his head down and hands folded, praying. And he never said a word. He just sat there quiet. Mark and Hub was trying to referee. He does a lot of refereeing at all the games around Farmington yet. And he tried to referee a basketball game, and he said he was crying so he couldn't see the plays. He couldn't see the ball or anything, and finally said to his partner, "You're gonna have to do it alone. I can't do it. I gotta go home."
Yeah.
And I went out and stopped at Peggy's store. She worked at True Value out here in South Lyon, and I asked her boss where she was, and he said, "Oh, she's back in the back room crying." And I said, "Oh gosh." I went back there and I said, "Peggy, you need to go home. You're not gonna do anybody any good here. You're just..." So she went home, and she had to, my other daughter-in-law was parapro at Lanigan School. I guess she was at Beechwood then. And she said she tried to help the kids, and she sat there too, just crying. She couldn't stop giving control. So she had to go home too. So the whole family
Really affected you. Huh?
And Mark said he came home, and each night he'd get home and get in the shower and just bawl his eyes out. So each one of us had a different way of
Dealing with it.
showing it with it, but he was a great kid, and I just feel his brother just got married, and our friends Maureen and Alan, he's Australian. They just went to Australia, and they met up with Greg and Sue and Ryan, and they brought a wedding gift to Ryan from us, and we got to meet Sue and Greg, and they just loved them. And, so it's lots of good memories of lots of trips. just, I think the most primitive place we ever visited was Papua New Guinea. And that was nothing like Africa or, you know, it was just very, very primitive.
Yeah.
And,
Made you grateful for some of the things you have at home, huh?
yeah, you bet, you bet. And I can remember going to we went to Romania before the fall of the wall. And a travel agent in Southfield had a special going to Romania. And we signed up for it. And when we got to Romania, they didn't have anything. Oh my gosh, they didn't. Those poor people didn't have, they were, you know, you go to a shoe store and they maybe have 2 pair of shoes and maybe a slipper and a man's boot or something. And that was their shoes, you know, they just couldn't get anything. And I was trying to think what.
So, is there anything else that you want to cover in particular?
Well, I think that's about it. I think the school district is a wonderful school. It's a wonderful time to teach there. And one other thing that I might add, that I taught at Forest School, and we had a large percentage of Jewish children there.
Okay.
And one of the most helpful things that happened is there was a rabbi that came out, I think, from Sherry Zedek. I'm not sure where he came from, but it's up there, the one, I think, in Southfield, the big one.
Okay.
Church there, or temple there in Southfield. And he told us, he said, you are going to have a large number of Jewish children in your classrooms. And he said, we would like to invite you to an orientation to the Jewish philosophy on education and invite you to a dinner. And I signed up for it, and I was so glad I did. That was probably the most helpful in-service that I'd ever had. The dinner was delicious and everything. And then he took us in and talked to us and explained about their religion and their beliefs, and that they believed that, you know, God gave them the brains, you know, and it was up to them to develop those brains as best they could. And if they weren't living up to their
Capabilities or whatever.
Jewish faith. And they are not helicopter mothers or helicopter fathers. They're just trying to make sure that their kids are reaching their potential.
Right.
And that was so helpful to me, because whenever I saw a mom that was, you know, willing to come in and work in the classroom with us, you know, come on in and help us. And they were always very supportive, very helpful, very supportive. And some of my best friends yet are still those people from Forest School. In fact, just in the last month, I've had visits from, you know, 3 or 4 of the families. The mothers have come out with other teachers and to see me, and it's given me a lasting friendship with so many people.
Yeah.
And an understanding of the Jewish faith, which I appreciated, and could understand.
Yeah. Makes it a lot easier if somebody takes the time to explain it to you, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the children are delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had one sad one was a little boy I had who was a troubled little boy when I had him in kindergarten at Bond, the old Bond school. And then when he got to be about 6th, 7th grade, he murdered a little girl in his subdivision, and that weighed heavily on me. And I wanted to go see Chucky, but I didn't because he wanted to see me, but my other friend, Mrs. Thompson, was a 4th grade teacher and had him at 4th grade, and she was very helpful, going to visit him and seeing them and giving him comfort, and she kept saying, he wants to see you, Fred. He called me a number of times, but I talked to my pastor and my, people that were guiding me, and they advised me not to see him because of my 2 children, that I was putting them in a danger if he ever was let out on, bail or whatever, is being rehabilitated, that it would weigh heavily on my children. And so I talked to him on the phone, but I was not able to go see him. But anyway, we had a lot of laughs and a lot of fun, and teaching was a great time there.
Yeah.
At that time, it was a great time to be a teacher. And with all the changes that have come the last few years, I feel terribly sorry for the teachers. They can't keep up with it. The demands, they've lowered their wages and their benefits, and we just don't have the caliber of people going into education that we need. Now we've got a huge shortage of teachers, and nobody wants to go in because the work is so detailed, and you have so much paperwork to do, and you have to account for this and account for that,
and the parents.
It's,
I imagine that must be one of the hardest things, is dealing with the parents sometimes, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Parents seem to complain all the time about everything.
But my parents, on the whole, are good, and I still hear from.
I mean, your children's parents, like the kids that you taught.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of problem with them, or they were probably more?
Yeah.
Nowadays, it seems like the parents are complaining all the time.
They weren't.
They weren't like that back
No,
then.
they
Yeah.
weren't.
They were more
down
respectful.
At the old Bond school or anything. They were. In fact, I had 2 parents that still call me regularly that had children in my class in 1962.
Yeah.
63.
Right.
And another little girl that lives here in town who was in my 74 class, Lisa Williams-Erdman, and she comes to see me all the time. And it's so rewarding to have all these children that and that's why I was glad that we lived in the same area of Farmington. After we sold our big house, we
Hi, how are you?
we moved to a condo.
You came because I just put her in the chair.
We moved to a condo at 13 Mile and Haggerty, or Halstead rather, 13 and Halstead.
Okay.
So that's where we were our last 20 years of our
Is that another Fox Road?
Well, it was Sierra
Because I was just
Point.
at some milk.
But it was right down the street from
I was on a street today, Huntsman Drive it was called. I was laughing because you...
Yeah. So, it had a lot of embarrassing moments, but I don't know if I should go into that.
Yeah, I think we should probably cut it off here for
I
now.
think so.
It's been a couple, 2 hours and 20 minutes, so...
Yeah.